Ethan, a 12-year-old boy, finds himself in an unexpected situation that demands a lot of his courage when he needs to save several people on a bus. But the miracle that occurred will shock you. On a bustling New York afternoon, Ethan Carter, a 12-year-old boy with a curious gaze and hair tousled by the breeze, climbed the steps of bus number 159. He swiped his pass with the routine familiarity of a daily commuter, briefly nodding to the driver, Mr. Harold, an elderly man with silvery hair and thick-rimmed glasses, who greeted Ethan with a gentle smile each afternoon. "Make sure you don't get too lost in those adventures today, Ethan," Harold remarked, watching the boy pass by with his favorite book in hand. Ethan headed for his preferred seat at the front of the bus, a strategic spot not only for the expansive view of the winding Lexington Avenue, but also because it made him feel like the co-pilot on this daily journey. With a contented sigh, he settled in, opening his well-worn book, whose battered cover bore the marks of countless escapades into the realm of imagination. The pages were portals for him, transporting him far beyond the towering skyscrapers that zoomed past the window. As the bus thrust into the city's core, Ethan delved into the story of a young explorer who, against all odds, braved wild storms and mythical monsters in search of hidden treasures. The sounds of traffic, the incessant honking, and the murmurs of other passengers blended into a background melody for the epic narrative unfolding before his eyes. Beside him, an elderly woman with silver hair and reading glasses watched Ethan with a smile, reminded of her own children who had once lost themselves in their reading adventures. She pulled knitting from her bag and began working the needles, crafting patterns that rivaled the complexity of the plots Ethan devoured. The bus made its regular stops, welcoming new faces and stories. A young couple holding hands, nervous and smiling, likely new to the city. A businessman with his phone glued to his ear, loudly negotiating deals. And a mother trying to soothe her two small children who giggled and scampered down the bus aisle. Each brought with them a fragment of New York's vast urban tapestry. Up front, Harold kept a steady hand on the wheel, but his eyes began to show a hint of uncertainty, a shadow of discomfort that Ethan had yet to notice. The bus continued on its route, gently swaying as it maneuvered through yellow taxis and cars playing their impatient symphonies of honks. As the pages of the book turned, Ethan was completely absorbed, his mind sailing through stormy seas and enchanted islands. The real world, with its skyscrapers scraping the sky and its crowds flowing like rivers on the sidewalks, had faded away for the young reader. He was adrift in an ocean of words and wonders, unaware that his daily commute would soon take a dramatic and perilous turn when the bus driver began to feel unwell, triggering a series of events that would change their lives forever. The usual hum of the city faded into the background as the bus, once a reliable vessel through the congested streets of New York, began to behave unpredictably. Its movements turned abrupt and erratic, swerving slightly as it navigated through the traffic. The sudden lurches were unlike the steady rhythm that Ethan had come to expect from his daily rides. Something was clearly amiss. From his front row seat, Ethan's attention snapped from the fantastical world of his book to the real and urgent drama unfolding before him. His eyes caught a troubling reflection in the window, an image of Mr. Harold, the usually composed bus driver, now grappling with visible distress. Harold's hands trembled on the wheel, his knuckles whitening as he struggled to maintain his grip. His face, typically calm and friendly, was etched with lines of strain, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air circulating through the bus. Ethan's heart raced as he pieced together the gravity of the situation. With the instinct of someone far beyond his years, he realized that every second could make a difference between safety and disaster. Pushing his book aside, he stood up abruptly, the movement so swift that his backpack thudded against the seat. The bus continued its erratic dance, veering dangerously close to a line of parked cars. Passengers murmured in concern, their casual conversations turning into anxious whispers. Some clutched their seats, while others looked around bewildered, trying to understand the cause of the disturbance. Without a second thought, Ethan maneuvered his way down the aisle, his sneakers squeaking against the floor as he dodged a stray bag and a spilled coffee. The closer he got to the front, The more pronounced the swaying became, as if the bus itself was in a state of panic. By the time he reached Harold, the old man's condition had worsened. His eyes, clouded and unfocused, barely registered Ethan's presence. "Ethan," Harold gasped, the effort to speak clearly costing him. "Something's not right." "I've got you, Mr. Harold," Ethan replied, his voice steadier than he felt. Placing one hand on the back of Harold's seat for balance, Ethan reached over with the other to steady the wheel. His fingers brushed against Harold's, which were cold and clammy. The bus sped toward an intersection, and Ethan, with no experience but driven by sheer necessity, guided the wheel, pulling the bus back into its lane just in time to avoid a collision with a crossing taxi. The horn of the taxi blared loudly, a stark contrast to the silence that fell inside the bus as passengers held their breaths, watching the young boy take control. Ethan's mind raced as he assessed their options. The need to bring the bus to a safe stop was paramount, but how? He had no knowledge of the controls, no understanding of the mechanics of driving. Yet there he was, a mere child, making split-second decisions in a critical moment. As he steadied the bus, navigating with a mix of adrenaline and fear, Ethan glanced back at the worried faces of the passengers. He needed help, and he needed it fast. The realization set in that this was only the beginning of their ordeal, as the bus, under his tentative control, hurtled towards an uncertain immediate future. As the bus careened down the bustling New York streets, Ethan, with a blend of fear and resolve, gripped the steering wheel with a determination that belied his tender age of 12. The chaos outside the bus was mirrored by the confusion within, as the vehicle swerved unpredictably, narrowly missing a stream of bicycles and pedestrians who leaped aside in alarm. The cacophony of horns and shouting filled the air, yet within the confines of the bus, a tense silence prevailed, punctuated only by the sound of Ethan's heavy breathing as he concentrated on the task at hand. Ethan's knuckles turned white as he clutched the wheel. The responsibility weighing on his shoulders was immense. With each turn, he adjusted his grip, his eyes darting between the road ahead and the rearview mirror, where he could see the anxious faces of the passengers. They trusted him, a young boy, to navigate them to safety, a task he never imagined he would face when he boarded the bus that afternoon. The engine growled under his hesitant control, responding unpredictably as Ethan navigated through traffic. Each decision he made was crucial. When a sudden gap appeared between two taxis, he seized the opportunity, maneuvering the large vehicle with surprising agility. His movements were not just reactions, they were anticipatory, showcasing a keen awareness of the bus's size and the flow of traffic around him. Harold, though weak, kept his eyes on Ethan, murmuring occasional guidance. "Steady, Ethan, just ahead to the left," he instructed with labored breaths. His voice was faint, almost lost beneath the din of the city, but Ethan caught every word, using them as anchors in the turbulent sea of his current reality. Despite his focus, Ethan's mind raced with questions and fears. How long could he keep this up? What if he made a mistake? The possibilities swirled in his head, but he pushed them aside, knowing that doubt could lead to disaster. As he navigated another tight corner, avoiding a delivery truck that had stopped unexpectedly, the strain began to show. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his arms ached from the effort of maintaining control, and his eyes stung from concentration. Yet, amidst this physical exertion, Ethan found a reservoir of strength within himself. He was doing it. He was keeping them safe. The bus finally started to approach a quieter street, allowing Ethan a momentary breath of relief. However, the respite was short-lived. As he glanced through the windshield, he saw the approaching outline of a wide, open space, an empty lot that seemed like a sanctuary in the urban maze. It was there that he aimed to bring the bus to a halt, away from the crowded city streets that had amplified the danger of their journey. Ethan's hands steadied as he prepared for what he hoped would be the final maneuver. His eyes were locked on the space ahead, calculating the distance and the bus's speed. Behind him, the whispered prayers and held breaths of the passengers filled the air, a testament to the gravity of the moment. As the bus rolled towards the open lot, Ethan knew that this was the crucial point. His actions in the next few minutes would determine the safety of everyone on board. The weight of this responsibility, immense for someone of his age, seemed to solidify his resolve. He was ready to do whatever it took to end this unforeseen ordeal. As Ethan maneuvered the unwieldy bus into the safety of the open lot, his focus was so intense that he barely noticed the shift in weight as someone moved towards the front. It was Nancy, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp features and a quick, purposeful stride. She had been sitting towards the back, reading through papers from her job at a downtown law firm, when the chaos erupted. Her professional instincts kicked in as she watched the young boy take control, and she knew she couldn't just sit back. Moving swiftly past the anxious passengers, her eyes fixed on Ethan's determined figure, Nancy reached the front of the bus. "Let me help," she said, her voice calm and authoritative, cutting through the murmur of frightened passengers. Ethan glanced at her, his relief palpable, but his attention never wavering from the road ahead. Together, they formed an impromptu team. Nancy placed one steadying hand on the back of the driver's seat and leaned forward to assess Harold, who was now slumped over, his breath shallow and uneven. With her other hand, she reached for the controls, stabilizing the wheel whenever Ethan's grip faltered due to his inexperience. As Ethan focused on bringing the bus to a complete stop, Nancy's gaze wandered to the area around the driver's seat. There, partially tucked under the edge of Harold's seat, was a nondescript black bag that seemed oddly out of place. With cautious movements, she retrieved it, her fingers brushing against the coarse fabric. The weight of the bag suggested it contained more than just personal items. Opening the zipper slowly, Nancy's eyes widened as she sifted through the contents. The bag was filled with a series of documents, maps, and what appeared to be detailed plans. As she scanned the papers, her heart rate quickened. The documents outlined a sinister plot involving the bus, a planned criminal act that was meant to unfold in the heart of the city. Maps were marked with specific routes and locations, accompanied by times and a list of instructions that made her skin crawl. Ethan finally brought the bus to a halt, the vehicle shuddering as the engine turned off. He turned to Nancy, his face flushed from exertion and the adrenaline beginning to ebb. "Is everything all right?" he asked, noticing the papers in her hands. "We need to call the police," Nancy responded, her voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside her. "There's something much bigger going on here, and we're right in the middle of it." As Ethan absorbed her words, the gravity of the situation settled around them like a heavy cloak. They were no longer just passengers and a makeshift driver. They had unwittingly become central figures in thwarting a potentially devastating criminal act. Nancy organized the papers, preparing to hand them over to the authorities. As she did so, her professional demeanor provided a calming influence on Ethan, who had managed to stop the bus, but now faced the reality of the danger they had just escaped, and the danger that might still lie ahead. With the documents in hand and the bus securely stopped, they prepared to contact the police, unknowingly setting the stage for a larger investigation that would unfold as soon as law enforcement arrived. In the relative stillness of the parked bus, with the engine's hum now silenced, Nancy carefully unfolded each document, her hands slightly trembling as the gravity of their contents became increasingly clear. The papers were meticulously organized, a chilling reminder of the planning that had gone into the sinister scheme they outlined. The revelation that Harold had been coerced into participating under duress added a human element to the crime that made it all the more harrowing. The documents revealed a network of communications between Harold and an unidentified criminal group. Text messages, printed and carefully preserved, showed a timeline of threats and coercions. It was evident that Harold had been manipulated over time, his compliance secured through threats not only to his own life, but also to those of his family members. The stakes were personal and deadly. The plan, as Nancy deciphered from the maps and accompanying notes, was for the bus to be driven into the most crowded part of the city during peak hours, causing maximum chaos and casualties. The route had been highlighted with a red marker, tracing a path through the city's heart, where pedestrian traffic and the density of vehicles would ensure a devastating impact. As Ethan stood beside Nancy, peering over her shoulder at the dark blueprints of disaster, his youthful face hardened with determination. The weight of what they had prevented, and what still might occur if any part of this plan were enacted elsewhere, pressed down upon them both with a sobering force. Nancy's voice was low and urgent as she briefed Ethan. "These people were using Harold as a pawn in their terrible game," she explained, her fingers pointing out the routes and key locations on the map. "It looks like they intended to make a statement, a destructive demonstration of power." The bus, now a quiet cocoon, seemed to echo with the enormity of their discovery. Outside, the fading light cast long shadows across the lot, a visual reminder of the day's shift into night and the symbolic darkness they were fighting against. Ethan, feeling a surge of protective instincts, looked around at the passengers, who were beginning to murmur among themselves, sensing the tension but unaware of the specifics. "We need to keep everyone calm and informed," he said, his voice more assertive than it had been just hours before. Nancy nodded in agreement, her legal mind already sorting through the necessary steps they would need to take. "First, we secure everyone's safety here. Then, we get the police and possibly the FBI involved. This is bigger than anything we could have anticipated." Their next move was clear. They needed to ensure that no part of this nefarious plot reached fruition. As Nancy dialed the police, her phone pressed firmly against her ear. Ethan watched her, his mind racing through scenarios of what might come next. The bus was no longer just a vehicle. It had become the center of a potential crisis that they had to manage. With the police on their way, the scene was set for a larger investigation to unfold. Ethan and Nancy prepared to explain everything once the authorities arrived, ready to hand over the documents that painted a terrifying picture of what could have been a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. Their unplanned partnership, formed under the most extraordinary circumstances, was about to be tested further as they stepped into roles neither had expected to play that day. With the immediate danger somewhat mitigated and the police en route, Ethan, under Nancy's guidance, took the wheel once again. His earlier trepidation had transformed into a sense of purpose as he steered the bus towards a designated safe location, an abandoned lot on the outskirts of the city, which Nancy, familiar with the area due to her legal work, had quickly identified as a secure spot away from bustling city centers. The atmosphere inside the bus had shifted from panic to a grave kind of silence, punctuated only by the low hum of conversation as passengers whispered amongst themselves, piecing together snippets of what had transpired. Every turn Ethan took was deliberate, each stop a calculated pause as he navigated the less traveled streets, ensuring that they remained under the radar, away from any potential threats that could still be lurking unseen. As the bus rolled into the secluded lot, its tires crunching on the gravel, a sense of temporary relief washed over everyone. The area was surrounded by old warehouses, long since abandoned, which now provided a visual barrier against the outside world, making it an ideal spot for them to regroup and await further assistance. Meanwhile, Lisa, a nurse with years of emergency experience, had been attending to Harold. With the bus now stationary, she could better assess his condition. She rifled through her bag, pulling out a small, well-equipped medical kit she always carried. Kneeling beside Harold, she checked his vitals with practiced ease, applying cold compresses to his forehead to help stave off shock and managing his breathing, which had become worryingly shallow. "Stay with us, Harold," she murmured as she worked, her voice a calming presence in the tense environment. She administered oxygen from a portable cylinder, another staple in her emergency kit, which helped stabilize Harold's breathing. Though his eyes remained closed, the color was slowly returning to his cheeks, a sign that the immediate crisis was at least temporarily averted. Around them, the passengers watched in a mix of awe and concern, the reality of their collective near-miss settling in. Ethan, standing by the driver's seat, kept a vigilant watch over the lot's entrance, his young face set in a frown of concentration. Despite his youth, his actions bore the gravity of someone much older, burdened by the knowledge of what might have been. Nancy, meanwhile, coordinated with the arriving police over her phone, her tone brisk and authoritative as she relayed details of the plot they had uncovered. "Yes, we're all here, safe for now," she explained, confirming their location and the seriousness of the documents found. "It's imperative that we get protection and investigate this fully. There's more at stake here than just this bus. As the first police cars rolled into view, dust swirling behind them as they approached the lot, Ethan and Nancy prepared to meet them, ready to hand over the critical evidence that had turned their ordinary day into an extraordinary fight for survival. The moment was fraught with tension, but also with a collective breath of anticipation, as the next phase of their ordeal was about to begin. The once deserted lot was quickly transformed into a hub of activity, as law enforcement responded to the urgency conveyed in Lisa's call. As she explained the precarious situation, her voice steady over the phone, officers were already mobilizing, their movements swift and coordinated. The police, understanding the potential scope of the threat involving a city bus and a detailed plan for mass chaos, initiated a large-scale operation designed not just to secure the bus and its passengers, but to begin unraveling the wider criminal plot that had targeted Harold. Meanwhile, Ethan, standing by the bus's driver's seat, maintained a watchful vigilance over the scene. His hands occasionally adjusted the rear-view mirror to keep an eye on Harold, who was now resting more comfortably under Lisa's care. Ethan's youthful face, framed by the bus's large windshield, was marked by a seriousness that belied his age. He scanned the area, noting the arrival of several police cars that came to a halt in a semicircle around the bus, their lights piercing the twilight. The officers disembarked with purpose, their equipment clanking slightly as they quickly set up a perimeter. They moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their training evident in every action. Some approached the bus with caution, while others conferred with Nancy, who held the incriminating documents securely under her arm. Ethan's gaze followed every movement, his mind racing with the implications of each step they took. He was acutely aware of the passengers' eyes on him, their expressions mingling relief with residual fear. In this moment, Ethan was more than just a temporary driver. He had become a symbol of unexpected resilience, a focal point of stability for those around him. As the police secured the area, one of the senior officers approached Ethan. His demeanor was calm but authoritative, a necessary presence in the chaotic aftermath of their near disaster. "We've got it from here, son," he said, a slight nod acknowledging Ethan's crucial role in averting a catastrophe. "You did good, really good." Nancy joined them, her voice low as she briefed the officer on the document's contents. The officer listened intently, his expression grave as the weight of the information sank in. He occasionally glanced at Ethan, as if reassessing the boy in front of him who had handled an unimaginable situation with such composure. With the scene now stable and the immediate danger contained, the police began a thorough investigation. They cordoned off the area, and forensic teams were called in to sweep the bus for any additional evidence. Each action was methodical, a piece of a larger puzzle they were rapidly piecing together based on the leads Ethan and Nancy had provided. As the investigation intensified, the focus shifted from immediate crisis management to a detailed examination of the conspiracy. The bus, once a simple vehicle for city commuters, was now the key to unraveling a criminal plot that could have had devastating consequences. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, the lot took on the feel of a nocturnal crime scene, bustling with detectives and crime scene technicians moving under the artificial glow of police floodlights. Ethan watched for a while, his role as the custodian of the bus winding down as the professionals took over. With the assurance that the situation was in capable hands, he finally allowed himself a moment to step back, his body feeling the weight of the day's events. As he did, the officer turned back to him, signaling that it was time for Ethan to fully hand over the scene and prepare to give his statement, marking the transition from action to accountability as the evening wore on. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the makeshift command center, the air was thick with tension and the murmur of urgent discussions. The lot, once a place of desolate quiet, had transformed into a scene straight out of a high-stakes police drama. The arrival of the SWAT team, clad in tactical gear and moving with precise coordination, underscored the gravity of the situation. They converged on the bus with a sense of purpose that was palpable, their boots crunching on the gravel as they set up positions around the vehicle. Ethan, standing at the front of the bus, took a deep breath before addressing the passengers. His voice, though young, carried a steadiness that had a calming effect on the anxious riders. "We need to exit the bus now. Please, follow me and stay together," he instructed, his eyes scanning the group to gauge their response. The passengers, warned from the ordeal but buoyed by the presence of so many law enforcement officers, nodded and began to gather their belongings with quiet efficiency. As they filed out, a line of SWAT officers guided them to a designated safe area away from the bus. Each passenger was met with a brief nod or a reassuring word from the officers, who were keenly aware of the psychological impact of the day's events. The officers' demeanor was professional yet compassionate, a balance that helped maintain a semblance of calm amidst the chaos. Meanwhile, other members of the SWAT team, along with bomb detection dogs, commenced a thorough sweep of the bus. The dogs, highly trained and focused, moved through the aisles with their handlers in tow, sniffing intently for any sign of explosives or other hazardous materials. The sound of their paws on the bus floor and the occasional command from their handlers added to the symphony of security operations that filled the air. Ethan watched from a distance, his arms crossed over his chest, as the SWAT team methodically worked their way from the front of the bus to the back. Every compartment, nook, and cranny was inspected with meticulous attention to detail. The team's efficiency was a testament to their training and the seriousness with which they approached the potential threat. As the initial sweep concluded without any immediate signs of danger, the forensic team took over, equipping themselves with protective gloves and bags for collecting potential evidence. Their examination was detailed, involving photography, swabbing, and careful collection of any items that seemed out of place or potentially linked to the criminal plot. Ethan's gaze occasionally drifted back to the passengers, now huddled together under the watchful eyes of police officers who took statements and offered reassurances. The relief of being safe for the moment was visible on their faces, but so was the strain of what they had endured. As the forensic team wrapped up their initial findings, the focus of the operation began to shift towards investigation and interrogation. The officers prepared to delve deeper into the background of the plot, aiming to uncover the identities and motivations of those behind the scheme. It was clear that the incident on the bus was just the surface of a much deeper conspiracy. With the bus declared secure and the immediate threat contained, the police captain gathered his team for a briefing. The twilight had given way to the deep blues of the evening sky, and the floodlights around the lot cast long shadows over the scene. Ethan, still standing apart, felt the weight of the day begin to settle on his shoulders as he prepared to join the officers, ready to share his account of the ordeal. The next phase of the investigation was about to begin, with the testimonies of Ethan and the other passengers crucial to understanding and dismantling the criminal network they had inadvertently disrupted. As the evening deepened into night, the operation centered around the bus in the secluded lot shifted from immediate crisis management to a strategic dismantling of the terrorist scheme. With the bus now cleared of any immediate threats and the passengers safely distanced from potential danger, the focus of law enforcement intensified on the broader implications of the documents discovered by Nancy and the testimony provided by Ethan. The information contained within those documents was a treasure trove for the investigative team. Maps, detailed plans, and communications laid out a network that extended far beyond the initial scope of a single coerced bus driver. This was a well-orchestrated plan with tendrils reaching into various parts of the city, designed to create chaos and fear. Armed with this knowledge, teams of detectives and anti-terrorism units worked through the night, piecing together the puzzle. Phone records were subpoenaed, surveillance footage from various parts of the city was reviewed, and known associates of the names found in the documents were brought in for questioning. Each piece of evidence helped to construct a clearer picture of the network and its members. In a series of swift, coordinated raids across the city, law enforcement agencies moved against the individuals identified as part of the conspiracy. Safe houses were breached, and suspects were apprehended in the dead of night, surprised by the sudden and silent approach of tactical teams. These arrests were carried out with precision, each one bringing a sigh of relief to the city's defenders, as potential orchestrators of chaos were taken into custody. The operations were not without their challenges. In several locations, the teams encountered resistance, leading to tense standoffs that required careful negotiation and tactical skill to resolve. However, the overwhelming advantage of surprise and preparation was on the side of law enforcement, allowing them to subdue resistance without casualty. Back at the command center, updates flowed in continuously, each successful raid bolstering the morale of the team. Nancy, her face illuminated by the glow of laptop screens showing maps and suspect profiles, coordinated closely with the field teams, providing legal oversight to ensure that the raids were conducted within the bounds of the law. Ethan, though no longer at the center of the action, watched with a mix of awe and relief. The bravery and efficiency of the police and SWAT teams in action were a stark contrast to the quiet, menacing plans he had helped uncover. His role had shifted from active participant to observer, but the impact of his actions reverberated through each step of the operation. As dawn approached, the reports of the night's successes were compiled. The network had been largely dismantled, its planned activities thwarted. The city, unknowing, had been saved from what could have been a series of devastating attacks. The law enforcement officers allowed themselves a moment of quiet pride and relief. Their swift actions had averted a tragedy, and the city owed its peace to their vigilance and the critical assistance of an alert young boy and a perceptive woman. With the immediate threat neutralized, the next phase of the operation was set to begin. The focus would now shift to interrogation and intelligence gathering from the suspects in custody. The goal was clear: to understand the motivations behind the plot and to prevent any future threats. As the first light of morning touched the city, the teams prepared for the long hours ahead, knowing that the real work of securing the city was just beginning. In the aftermath of the thwarted attack, the city began a slow but sure process of recovery, the tension of the near miss dissipating like fog under the morning sun. The news of the plot, laden with details of an impending disaster that had been averted through the bravery of an impromptu group of heroes, spread rapidly through news outlets and social media. Ethan Carter, the young boy who had taken the wheel of a city bus in a crisis, became a symbol of unexpected heroism. His story, paired with the decisive actions of Nancy, the astute legal professional, and Lisa, the quick-thinking nurse, painted a vivid picture of courage and community that resonated deeply with the city's residents. Harold, the bus driver coerced into the terrifying plot, slowly regained his health in a quiet hospital ward. Under the gentle care of medical professionals, he recovered not just from the physical symptoms of his ordeal, but also from the psychological scars that had been inflicted upon him by his captors. With his health restored, Harold became a crucial witness in the case against the criminal network. His testimony, detailed and damning, provided the authorities with invaluable insights into the workings and manipulations of the terror group. His resilience, in coming forward to speak against those who had tried to break his spirit, earned him the respect and sympathy of the public. Meanwhile, Nancy and Lisa were recognized for their integral roles in the crisis. At a well-attended ceremony hosted by the city's mayor, they were awarded for their bravery. Nancy, who had used her legal acumen to help navigate the complex situation, and Lisa, whose medical expertise had saved Harold's life and ensured the safety of the passengers, were both celebrated. The mayor praised them, not just for their actions on that fateful day, but for their exemplary citizenship, embodying the spirit of the city that prides itself on its resilience and mutual support. The ceremony was a poignant moment for all involved. Family members, friends, and even strangers who had followed the story came together, their applause and cheers filling the air, a communal acknowledgement of the disaster averted and the lives saved. The event was covered extensively, with reporters eager to capture the emotional speeches and the heartfelt gratitude expressed by city officials. Ethan, standing beside his fellow honorees, felt a mix of pride and humility. The weight of the public's gaze was heavy, but the support and warmth he received made him realize the impact of his actions. He was no longer just a schoolboy. He had become a public figure overnight, a role model to many for his bravery and quick thinking. As the city celebrated these new heroes, the undercurrent of the celebration was one of reflection and renewed vigilance. The incident had exposed vulnerabilities that needed addressing, prompting discussions on public safety and the importance of community awareness and cooperation in preventing such threats. The days following the ceremony saw a strengthened bond among the residents, a collective resolve to remain vigilant and supportive of one another. The story of Ethan, Nancy, Lisa, and Harold served as a reminder of the strength found in unity and the profound impact of individual acts of bravery. With the city slowly returning to its usual rhythm, the sense of normalcy was a balm to the rattled nerves of many. However, the memories of what could have been lingered, serving as a catalyst for change in how emergencies were managed and prevented. As the narrative of heroism continued to inspire, the individuals at the heart of the story prepared to resume their everyday lives, forever changed but resolute in their commitment to their community. The narrative of Ethan Carter, the young hero who had steered a city bus to safety, transcended the local news and captivated a nation. His act of bravery became a touchstone for discussions on courage, resilience, and the role of youth in facing and overcoming crises. His story, emblematic of hope and action, was shared across countless platforms, making him a household name overnight. As the weeks passed and the initial shock of the event faded into a proud memory for the city, plans were made for a national recognition of Ethan's bravery. It was at this larger, nationally televised ceremony that Ethan was invited to speak, not just as a survivor, but as an emblem of youthful valor. The venue was grand, filled with dignitaries, community leaders, and media from across the country, all eager to hear from the young man who had demonstrated such remarkable bravery. Standing at the podium under the bright lights of the stage, Ethan looked out over the sea of faces. His heart pounded not just with nervousness, but with a deep sense of responsibility. He began his speech by recounting the harrowing day, his voice steady and clear. As he described the sequence of events, the audience was drawn into the dramatic retelling, hanging on his every word. But it was when he shifted the focus from the past to the lessons of the present and the hopes for the future that the room truly stilled, everyone captivated by his maturity and insight. Ethan spoke passionately about the importance of vigilance in everyday life, a lesson he had learned from his mother, who was in the audience, her eyes brimming with pride. His mother, a seasoned FBI agent, had instilled in him from a young age the values of awareness and preparedness, qualities that had undoubtedly played a part in how he handled the crisis. Courage isn't just about facing danger, Ethan said. It's also about being prepared to do the right thing at the right moment. His speech also touched on the broader implications of his actions, urging his listeners to not only recognize the heroism in extraordinary acts, but to appreciate the everyday bravery and service of individuals like his mother, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes in law enforcement. He called for support and respect for all first responders, highlighting their crucial role in maintaining safety and order. The ceremony concluded with a standing ovation, the audience moved by Ethan's words and the depth of his character. Television cameras broadcast his speech nationwide, and social media lit up with quotes and praises, further cementing his status as a symbol of national pride. As the applause died down and the ceremony came to a close, Ethan stepped off the stage to a flurry of congratulations. Reporters clamored for interviews, and young attendees looked up to him with admiration. In the midst of this, Ethan remained humble, always redirecting the praise towards his fellow citizens and first responders. In the days that followed, as Ethan returned to his routine, albeit altered by newfound recognition, the nation continued to reflect on his message of vigilance and courage. His words lingered in public discourse, inspiring community initiatives focused on safety and preparedness. As the narrative of his heroism was woven into the national fabric, Ethan prepared for what would come next, ready to embrace his role as not just a hero, but as a voice for positive change in a world that often seemed fraught with uncertainties. As the echoes of applause from Ethan's speech faded in the grand hall, a particularly touching moment unfolded that would etch this day even deeper into the hearts of those present. The ceremony had one last, stunning revelation that tied the threads of personal courage and family legacy together in a poignant tableau. After Ethan had stepped down from the podium, the master of ceremonies took the stage once again, signaling the audience to settle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying a tone of intrigue, "we have shared the story of a young hero today, but there is more to this narrative. A hidden chapter that reveals the depth of familial bonds and the unseen forces that shape our heroes." The curtains behind the stage parted slowly, and standing there, bathed in a soft spotlight, was Ethan's mother, Sarah Carter. Her appearance was met with a murmur of surprise and a collective turning of heads as the audience took in the sight of the woman who had played such a critical role in Ethan's life, yet behind the scenes. Sarah, who had maintained a composed facade throughout Ethan's speech, now stepped forward. Her presence was commanding yet graceful, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and emotion. "Many of you know me as an FBI agent dedicated to my duty," she began, her voice steady but soft. "But today I stand before you as a mother, profoundly proud of my son and what he has accomplished." The revelation was that Sarah had been deeply involved in undercover work, her life a tapestry of covert operations and secret identities, much of it unknown to the public and even to her own family to some extent. "In my career, I have faced many dangers, and I have often carried the weight of my secrets alone. But one secret I have always cherished is the strength and courage I see in my son, which perhaps, in some small way, I helped to inspire." The audience listened, rapt, as Sarah detailed her journey without divulging sensitive information, highlighting the parallels between her life's work and the values she instilled in Ethan. The resilience, the readiness to act in the face of danger, and the moral compass that guides one in darkness. These are the gifts I hope to give my son, taught not through lectures, but through the very life I have led. This heartfelt disclosure added a new dimension to Ethan's story, casting light on the role of upbringing and parental influence in molding a person's character. It underscored the importance of role models and the silent, enduring support that often goes unnoticed but not unfelt. As Sarah concluded her speech, she joined Ethan on stage. They embraced, a mother and son united not just by blood but by a shared creed of service and bravery. The crowd stood once more, moved by the display of familial love and the deep bonds that had supported a young hero's rise. The cameras flashed, capturing this intimate moment, likely to be shared across countless news platforms, a vivid illustration of the ceremony's theme, family ties that bind and build futures. As the event drew to a close, the attendees mingled, their conversations abuzz with the day's revelations. Ethan and Sarah remained at the heart of the gathering, their story a compelling reminder of the impact of family in shaping the heroes among us. As the evening wound down, the reflections on family and heroism continued to resonate, setting the stage for Ethan to contemplate his next steps, inspired by his mother's legacy and supported by the community that had come to celebrate him. As the ceremonies concluded and the audience dispersed, the story of the miracle on Line 159 continued to ripple through the community and beyond. The city itself seemed to stand a little taller, its citizens moved by the profound example of valor and the strong familial bonds that had come to light. The tale of Ethan Carter transcended the event itself, sparking conversations in cafes, classrooms, and living rooms about the nature of heroism and the fabric of society that supports it. In the days following the national recognition, Ethan found himself at the center of a newfound public attention. Schools invited him to speak to their students, local businesses and community leaders lauded his actions, and social media buzzed with his story, spreading his influence far wider than he could have imagined. Yet, through it all, Ethan remained grounded, his demeanor humble, his messages always turning back to the community and the collective effort of everyday heroes. The City Council held a special session to honor Ethan and his family, presenting them with the Civic Award for Courage, an accolade reserved for those whose actions profoundly impact the city. The mayor spoke eloquently of the quiet strength and dedication of the Carter family, emphasizing that their commitment to justice and public safety had not only averted a disaster, but had also reinforced the city's resolve to foster a vigilant and supportive community. Ethan, standing beside his mother Sarah at the council ceremony, listened as stories of other unsung heroes were shared, of neighbors, teachers, and local volunteers whose daily acts of kindness and bravery knit the fabric of their community. It was clear that his actions had ignited a broader recognition of these quiet contributions that often go unnoticed. The miracle on Line 159 was chronicled in a documentary that aired later that year, capturing not just the dramatic events of that day, but also the aftermath of community healing and solidarity. The documentary featured interviews with Ethan, Sarah, and other key figures from the incident, weaving together a narrative of human resilience and the transformative power of courage. As the seasons changed, the episode served as a continuous reminder of the potential for goodness and heroism in every individual. Schools implemented new programs focused on civic responsibility and emergency preparedness, inspired by Ethan's bravery and his mother's dedication to service. Community forums and workshops sprang up, aiming to empower citizens with the knowledge and tools to effectively contribute to public safety. Ethan, for his part, took on a role much larger than he had ever anticipated. He became a youth ambassador for civic engagement, speaking at events and participating in initiatives that aimed to nurture a culture of proactive citizenship. His message was clear and consistent. True courage does not know age, and everyone has the power to make a difference. As this chapter of his life melded into the fabric of the city's history, Ethan looked forward to the future, inspired by the past and ready to continue shaping a world where bravery and justice were not just ideals, but lived realities. The legacy of bravery he had helped forge was now a beacon for all, proving that in the hands of the courageous, the course of destiny could indeed be steered toward the greater good.